cantilevered building. It's a perfect structure for a truck bomb to do the maximum amount of damage to. And if it did, in the explosion, if it did bring down that fascia area and rupture the ATF's arsenal room, and since the ATF we know, was keeping the propellant caps or percussion caps for C4, it is reasonable to assume that they also were keeping C4 there. If a case of C4 fell out of that room during that initial blast, then demolition people, and you can check with anybody who is familiar with C4, they'll tell you C4 is extremely safe to handle, but you can set it off with 3,500 pounds of pressure per square inch. And so if a case of C4 came out of that room, or if C4 was stored in another area of that building, in that southeast area, and if that fascia came down from the explosion outside, which I think we all agree it did, then it builds up on top of 3,500 pounds is nothing when you look at the fascia of that building. Then that would explain that huge amount of destruction on the southeast side. So what we may have had is the government's ineptitude, the ATF overlooking and not following procedures. They may have killed most of the people in that building that day. And certainly, they're not going to be the first ones to admit it.
Well, I was studying that, and looking at my watch, I finally discovered I'd missed 2 buses. So I said, well, I have the option of waiting till 9:05, 9:10, or 9:15, catch another bus. But I was pushed for time to make my connection to get out here in sufficient time to the Capitol. So I run a block away to Northwest 5th and Robinson, and luckily a bus was coming through. It was bus number 2 to be exact. I luckily caught that bus and went to the transfer terminal and got onto bus number 18. Okay, and this was, I guess I would say it was about 8:55, 8:56 when I caught bus number 2. I got to the transfer terminal. No sooner I get off of bus number 2, get on to bus number 18. I'm climbing aboard and just had sat down when I heard this very violent rumble under the bus. It was a pushing type motion. It actually raised that bus up on its side. About 6 or 7 seconds later, another one, which was more violent than the first, pushed the bus again. And I thought that second time the bus was going to turn over.
In discovering where the ATF room was located, sure enough, it turns out that that room was up on the 9th floor, and it runs from north to south on the furthest east side. That room was ruptured. The photographs clearly show that the room was ruptured, and the area that is ruptured is directly over what we now know or call as the pit area. And the pit area is that large coned-in area on the southeast section of the Muir building. Now, what's important about that is that's the area where far more than 50% of the fatalities that day occurred.
I had talked to a lady that worked at the Water Resources building, and she had heard the explosions. And she said that she was upset about the fact when it came over the news media that they were saying there was just 1 explosion, when she heard 2 explosions that morning.
As stated at the beginning of this film, the opinions and conclusions of these witnesses are their own. Why do they feel it is important for you to know what they saw or heard? What's in it for them? Perhaps it can best be illustrated in their own words.
The only way I can respond to all that and explain why I come forward is that there was one big mistake made that day, that our grandsons were in that building. If it could have been anybody else's kids, middle America that is afraid to step forward, it would have been a lot easier for the feds, for the FBI, and for ATF and everyone, because they probably would keep their mouth shut. But they made a big mistake. Chase and Colton were in that building that day. And until I'm satisfied that everyone has been brought to justice, and that all the problems with the ATF having prior knowledge, with them having explosives stored in that building, with the FBI attempting to cover up the true Middle East connection here, until all that comes out, I'm going to take every opportunity I can to step forward on radio, videos, television, and continue talking about it.
Because I don't feel like the people of the United States and America is getting the truth about what happened. I feel that they imploded the building too soon. I feel that they destroyed a lot of evidence that was in the building. The day of the bombing, that evening, they were concerned about gathering evidence, and a few days after that, the way the people had taken over down there, literally working and just scurrying around trying to get people out of there, I feel like they had destroyed the evidence that was outside that they really were looking for. But I don't understand why they imploded the building as early as they did.
I think they blew the building up because they wanted to get rid of the crime scene. And what else do you know that a crime scene is destroyed before they ever go to trial, or before a thorough investigation's done? And to me, it just seems like there's a cloud of doubt over everything the ATF has anything to do with. If there's nothing to hide, why is that cloud of doubt there? Let it be out in the open. Let everybody see what's going on, unless you have something to hide.
It's just hard for me to be down there and see what went on, knowing what went on, and none of it's been portrayed in the media.
I think every American wanted to help with a rescue effort and would have if he could. This is something that I can do, and I feel that every seismologist who has any ability to analyze signals from explosions should take a look at this so that there is a unanimous decision and understanding of what took place on the day of the explosion. There's been a general tendency to force the thinking in one direction or another, and it's very hard as a scientist looking at the data to keep an unbiased opinion, because you are anti-government if you go one way, you're anti-free understanding of what's going on. You're always being pushed to take one side or the other.
Well, as I told someone the other day, my witnesses are telling me one thing, and I've had, after over 100 days of interviewing people, I feel like that I have met a number of very, very good people that are very credible. Their stories check out, and they're telling me one thing in the areas that we've discussed today. The government is telling a completely separate story. Either there was 2 buildings blown up in Oklahoma City that day, or the government is certainly not telling the truth about what happened that day.
I would like to say to the American public this, that we individually and collectively must get involved in the government process. We must start asking questions. Let us not be so naive as we were in the past. We've learned a lot of lessons since the Kennedy assassination. Let's not be just to accept something just because the media says that this is the way it happened, because there are a lot of kind of underlying questions that have not been answered in this incident, just like with the Kennedy assassination. So we need to get at the truth, and this is what we need to know. It's a matter of accountability. What happened? And it's plain and simple. What is the truth? That's all we want to know. And it's going to be up to us, the people, to band together and unite as a nation to get to the bottom of this. Let's not let another 30 years go by. Let's not, for God's sake, no.
Chuck, I think it's important for people to realize that what they do makes a difference. What every one of us chooses to do will make a difference in the political process. You know, we hear over and over, and we've all said from time to time in the past, that my one vote, or I can't make any difference, just one person. But it really does make a difference. And we all need to be more informed of what our elected officials are doing and what they're not doing. And that's what I would say to the American people. Your input, your involvement makes a difference. When you write or call your state legislator, your U.S. congressman, your U.S. senator, it makes a tremendous difference. And when you do that in an informed way and continue to stay in contact with your elected officials, it makes a tremendous difference. And I would hope that the American people would look seriously at the information that we provided and look even more deeply into it, do research on their own, and contact their elected officials.
The events which took place on April 19th have taken our innocence.